It was the perfect day, the kind of day you dream about when you're a little kid. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree in the corner of the yard. White chairs were set up in perfect rows on the pristine green lawn. For a young couple, this wasn't just their wedding day. It was a celebration of survival, of hard work, and of building a life together in a place they were proud to call home. The bride was a bundle of joyful nerves. She had planned this day for over a year. She wanted it at their home, not some rented hall. This backyard was her sanctuary. It was where they hosted barbecues and planted their first garden. It was theirs. As she looked out the window at the guests arriving, her best friends, her cousins, her grandparents, her heart felt so full it could burst. In the living room, the groom stood in his sharp black suit, taking a deep, steadying breath. He was a man who understood the value of hard work, having saved every penny for this house in this quiet suburban neighborhood. It was their dream. He knew they were one of the only black families on the block, but he always believed in leading by example. Be a good neighbor, he always said, and you'll get good neighbors back. He was ready to marry the love of his life. Nothing could ruin this day, but a good neighbor is not what they had. The man next door was a creature of bitter routine. He had lived on this street for 30 years and saw himself as its guardian. When the young couple moved in, he didn't bring over a pie. He didn't wave. He watched. He complained when their soft jazz music was, in his words, a disturbance. He'd called the city code enforcement because their grass was, in his opinion, a quarter-inch too high. Every friendly hello was met with a curt nod or a turned back. He saw their joy not as something to be shared in, but as a threat to his peace. And today, the day of their wedding, his anger was simmering. The ceremony began. The groom stood at the altar, his eyes locked on the end of the aisle. The music was perfect. Then she appeared. The bride, on her father's arm. She was radiant, absolutely breathtaking. The entire crowd rose to their feet. The groom's breath caught in his throat. This was the moment that made all the struggle and all the saving worth it. He saw her, and she saw him. The world melted away, but the world has a funny way of forcing itself back in. The man next door had seen enough. The cars, the music, the laughter. These people. It was too much. He marched right out of his front door, his face red and blotchy, and stomped across his lawn to the property line. Just as the bride was taking her first steps down the aisle, the music stopped abruptly. "What is all this?" the neighbor shouted. His voice was a harsh, ugly sound that cut through the beautiful quiet. The bride froze. Her father put a protective arm in front of her. The groom's smile faded, replaced by a weary, sinking feeling. "Sir," the groom said, his voice calm but tight, "this is our wedding. We'd appreciate it if you kept your voice down." The neighbor let out a harsh laugh. "Your wedding? This is a public disturbance. This is not what this neighborhood is for. You have all these cars, all this noise. I've had it." A guest, an uncle, stood up. "Hey man, show some respect." "I don't have to respect anything." The neighbor spat back, his eyes wild. He pointed a shaking finger right at the groom. "You people think you can just come in here and do whatever you want. I'm not going to allow it. I'm calling the cops." A single tear rolled down the bride's cheek, smudging her makeup. All the joy from seconds before had evaporated, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. The groom looked at his bride, seeing her dream shattering. "Sir, I'm asking you, as a neighbor, please go back inside," the groom said, his voice dangerously level. "You are trespassing." "I'm trespassing? I'm trespassing?" the neighbor yelled. He pulled out his phone and pressed the call button. "Yes, hello? I need to report a major disturbance. A huge, out-of-control party. My neighbors." "Yes, them. They're loud, They're blocking the street, and they're threatening me. You need to send officers, now." He hung up the phone with a triumphant smirk on his face, crossing his arms. "They're on their way," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We'll see who belongs here." The groom closed his eyes for just a second, a flicker of deep, profound disappointment. He had wanted one day. Just one day. In the silence, the sound of a distant, but rapidly approaching, police siren began to wail. The perfect day was broken. The neighbor thought he had won. He had no idea who he had just called the cops on. The wail of the sirens grew louder and louder, ripping through the quiet, stunned air of the wedding. The beautiful string music was long gone, replaced by a sound that made everyone feel cold. The wedding guests were no longer just shocked. They were nervous. The uncle who had spoken up now stood silently, his hands clenched. The bride's father held his daughter, who was trying not to sob, her small, hopeful "I do" now seeming like a distant dream. The groom stood like a statue, his back to his bride, watching the street. He turned his head slightly and whispered to her, "It's okay. I'm going to handle this. I promise you, our day is not ruined." His voice was low, but it held a steel certainty that made her look up. A police cruiser, with its red and blue lights flashing, pulled up to the curb. The flashing lights painted the white flowers and the guests' faces in ugly, unnatural colors. 2 officers stepped out. One was older, with a tired, mustached face that had seen too much. The other was younger, with a stiff posture, looking like he followed every rule. Before the officers could even take in the scene, the neighbor rushed towards them, his face a mask of false terror. "Thank God you're here, officers," he yelled, pointing frantically. "Look at this. It's completely out of control. They're blocking the street, the music was deafening, and when I asked them to be respectful, he threatened me." The neighbor's finger shot out again, aimed directly at the groom, who stood calmly by his own driveway. This was a serious accusation. The 2 officers' expressions hardened. They looked past the neighbor at the man in the black suit. The older officer scanned the yard, his eyes taking in the floral arch, the guests in their finest clothes, and the crying bride. He looked confused. "Sir," the officer said to the neighbor, This ... This looks like a wedding." The neighbor let out a scoff. "That's what they say. It's a public nuisance. They don't belong here. You have to shut this down. You have to make them leave." The groom gave his bride's hand one last, reassuring squeeze. He calmly walked away from the altar, his polished wedding shoes stepping onto the pavement. He didn't walk quickly. He didn't look angry. He walked with a heavy, steady purpose. He stopped a respectful distance from the officers, who were still listening to the neighbor's rambling complaints. "Officers," the groom said. His voice was perfectly level, not loud, but it cut straight through the neighbor's yelling, making him stop. The younger, stiff officer held up a hand. "Sir, we've received a complaint of a public disturbance and a threat against this man. We need you to ... double quotes. I don't care what he says." The neighbor shrieked, his victory just moments away. "Arrest him. He threatened me." The groom let out a long, slow breath. He had seen this exact kind of confrontation 100 times. He just never thought it would be at his own altar. He looked past his furious neighbor and spoke directly to the 2 officers. "Gentlemen, my apologies for this. This is my wedding. The man who called you, he's been harassing my fiancée and me since the day we moved in." The older officer still looked skeptical. "Sir, that may be, but we have a formal complaint. We still have to—" "I understand," the groom interrupted, his voice still calm. "You have a job to do." "So do I." The neighbor's smirk was huge. He thought he had won. Then, the groom slowly reached into the inside breast pocket of his tuxedo. Instantly, the younger officer's training kicked in. He tensed, his hand dropping to his belt. "Sir," he barked, "keep your hands where I can see them." Slowly, the entire wedding party gasped. The groom froze, his hand still inside his jacket. "It's my wallet," he said slowly and clearly. "My identification, may I?" The older officer nodded, his eyes now watching the groom's hand like a hawk. The groom slowly, very slowly, pulled out a black folded leather wallet. It wasn't a normal wallet. It was a professional badge holder. He didn't flip it open with a flourish. He simply held it in his palm and offered it, close to the older officer. The officer took it, flipped it open, and looked inside. The change was instant. The officer's tired eyes went wide. His entire body snapped to a more respectful posture. "Oh," he said, clearing his throat. "Oh, I see. My apologies, detective." He quickly nudged the younger officer, who leaned in, saw the badge, and immediately took his hand off his belt, his own face flushing with embarrassment. "Sir, we had no idea," the younger officer said. The neighbor was completely confused. What is it? What are you apologizing to him for? He's the one breaking the law." The groom didn't even look at the officers. He took his wallet back from them. He turned his head, very slowly, until his cold, steady eyes locked with his neighbor's. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just done. He held the wallet out and, with a flick of his wrist, opened it, holding it just inches from the neighbor's face. Inside, nestled against the dark leather, was a polished, gleaming gold police badge. It shined in the sunlight. It was unmistakable. The neighbor's smug red face lost all its color. It was as if someone had pulled a plug and drained the blood right out of him. His mouth, which had been open to yell again, just hung open. No sound came out. His eyes darted wildly from the gleaming badge to the groom's unblinking face and back to the badge. The click of understanding in his brain was deafening. You're... The neighbor stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The groom's voice was quiet, but every single guest heard it. "I am, and you just called the cops. On a cop, on his wedding day. You filed a false report. And you threatened a detective. In front of over 50 witnesses." The neighbor's face, once red with rage, was now a ghostly, sick-looking pale white. He began to shake, his entire body trembling. He had instantly, terribly, regretted everything. The backyard fell into a heavy, profound silence. It was a quiet so thick it felt louder than the sirens had been. The neighbor's mouth was still hanging open, but all the color had drained from his face. He had gone from beet red with rage to a ghostly, sickly pale white. The groom's gold badge shone in the sunlight, an undeniable, gleaming piece of proof. The neighbor's mind was racing, trying to catch up. A cop, a detective, he's one of them. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't just called the police on a party. He had called 911 on another police officer. He had filed a false report. He had accused a detective of threatening him. He saw his entire, quiet, orderly life crumbling in an instant. Arrests, lawyers, maybe even jail. The man who saw himself as the guardian of the law had just tried to use it as a weapon. And it had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. The two uniformed officers now stared at the neighbor with pure, cold anger. They were embarrassed to have been called out for this. The older mustached officer took a step toward the neighbor. His voice was low and serious. "Sir," he said, "do you have any idea the amount of trouble you are in right now? You wasted city resources. You lied to law enforcement. And you harassed this detective. On his wedding day." The neighbor stammered, his voice a hoarse croak. I didn't know." The younger officer snapped. "That's the point. You didn't try to know. You saw a black family, and you assumed the worst. You lied to get us here. "That is a crime, sir." The neighbor was visibly trembling, his knees looking weak. The groom watched all of this. He didn't feel victorious. He just felt tired. He just wanted this day, one day, to be about love. He slowly closed his leather wallet and tucked it back into his tuxedo's inner pocket. He didn't look at the neighbor again. He had wasted enough of his wedding on this man. He turned to the two officers. "Officers," he said, his voice steady but weary. "Thank you for responding. As you can see, everything is under control. We have a permit for the music. We're just trying to get married." He then motioned toward the trembling neighbor. "As for him," the groom said, "I'm not pressing charges. Not today. Today is my wedding day. I just want him gone. Can you please escort him home and make sure he stays there?" The older officer nodded immediately, his eyes showing clear respect for the groom. "Yes, sir, detective, absolutely." He turned back to the neighbor. "You heard him. You're done here. Get in your house. And do not come back out. Do you understand me?" The neighbor, completely broken, could only nod. "Go," the officer commanded. The neighbor turned. It was the longest walk of his life. He wasn't walking. He was shuffling, defeated. Every guest was watching him. Every smartphone was still recording his utter humiliation. He fumbled with his keys at his front door, opened it, and disappeared inside, slamming it shut. The officers walked back to their cruiser. The older one paused, looked back at the groom, and said, "Congratulations on your wedding, detective." And ... "I'm truly sorry about all this." The groom simply nodded in thanks. The police car drove away, and with it, all the tension and ugliness vanished. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, from the back row, a single guest started to clap. Just a slow, steady applause. Then another person joined, and another. And then, suddenly, the entire backyard erupted in thunderous applause and cheers. This wasn't just relief. It was a standing ovation for their hero. The groom let out the longest, deepest breath of his life. He turned, searching for his bride. She was standing right where he had left her, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. It was the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. She didn't wait. She hiked up her expensive dress and ran. She didn't care about the grass. She ran right to him and threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his suit. You. She sobbed, but they were tears of joy. He held her tight. "I'm right here," he whispered. "I'll always be here. Our day is not ruined. I promise." He gently wiped her tears. The wedding officiant, who had been watching all this with wide eyes, cleared his throat. "Well," he said, a smile breaking out on his face, "I believe the to honor and protect part of the vows has just been very publicly demonstrated." The guests erupted in laughter. The tension was finally completely broken. The beautiful, soft music started to play again, right where it had left off. The groom turned to his bride, took her hands, and looked into her eyes. The world melted away again, and this time, nothing forced its way back in. They said their vows, their voices clear and strong. And when the officiant said, "You may now kiss your bride," the cheer from the crowd was deafening. A sound of pure joy that could be heard even through the neighbor's tightly shut door. A week later, a "for sale" sign appeared on the neighbor's front lawn. They never saw him again. The couple continued to build their life in the house they loved, on the street they deserved. Their story became a quiet legend, a reminder that no matter how loud hate can be, love and justice will always have the final word. What did you think of that ending? Do you believe the neighbor got what he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you love stories where justice is served, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more emotional, true life stories. And don't forget to hit that bell icon so you never miss an update from us. Thanks for watching.